Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? It's very mild enthusiasm. I mean, this is a good night, right? Yeah. All right. You're improving. We'll check back in a bit. We'll see how you're doing. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone who's watching online. So glad that you're joining live from NYPL, which is, of course, made possible by the continuing generosity of Celeste Bartos, Manaz Ispahani Bartos, and Adam Bartos, and, of course, by all of you here. My name is Aiden Flax-Clark. I'm the director of Live from NYPL. For anyone who is new to Live, we have some really great events coming up after tonight, and we really hope to see you back here. They're all free, so you have no excuse not to come. Tomorrow night, Glory Edom, the founder of Well Read Black Girl, will be here to talk about her new memoir, Gather Me. Next month, Live Music and Conversation will celebrate our recently acquired collection of sheet music from the legendary Yiddish radio station WEVD. And in December, we are going to shut down this hellscape of a year by opening up the entire building for one night to celebrate James Baldwin, who is the subject. Yeah, right? I don't know if you know, but he's the subject of an amazing exhibition up at the Schomburg Center for Research and Research in Black Culture in Harlem. Has anyone seen it? All right. Well, the rest of you. 2 A's, many F's. The F's are future A's, though. We have the papers of James Baldwin, if you don't know, so please go see it. And we're going to highlight some of the stories about him that didn't get to make it into the show here in the building. But tonight, it's Crime Night, Public Domain Edition. We have an incredible group of actors who have graciously offered their time and expertise to read true stories of true crime from right here in New York City, and all of them come straight from our own collections here at the library. The event is inspired by our exhibition upstairs, Treasures. Anyone seen that? All right, couple more A's, great. Treasures highlights many of the greatest hits of our special collections, and if you've been there, you know it's divided into 9 thematic sections. One of them is on New York City, so we're taking our inspiration from that section for tonight's readings. New York, as you know, has a fairly famous and pretty rich criminal history. It's not just a shockingly viable presidential candidate who's been convicted of 34 felonies, or a mayor who's indicted for bribery. There's a lot. And I'm sure you know a lot of its greatest hits. But instead of going that route, doing the mafia or the Warriors, we've dug into some other criminal corners from our collections tonight. So all the readings are historical. They're all in the public domain. They come from our archival collections, from our online newspaper databases, digital collections of photographs, prints, and maps, our digital books, and of course our fairly extensive collection of print books. All of which all of you can access for free with your library card, and surely all of you have a library card. Yes, we're gonna get more A's on this. Okay, if you've ever been here before, you know I enjoy shaming anyone who comes here without a library card, so. We hold 56 million items in our research collections in this building, in the Library for the Performing Arts, at the Schomburg Center, and that doesn't count our circulating branches, not to mention databases, digital books, and so on, which means that no matter what your creative or intellectual inquiry might be, we are a resource for you, and for all of that, we ask the low, low price of $0, which I know that you know, but it's my job to remind you. But just remember that every time you hear about someone trying to ban a book in a library, that person is helping to close off the unparalleled levels of access to knowledge and creativity that all libraries offer. And on that note, let's get to our first reading, A Man Who Loved Banning Books. Whitney Houston was not the only person who believed that the children are the future. Back in 1883, a self-appointed policer of the public morals named Anthony Comstock knew what Moms for Liberty knows today, that the fragile hearts and minds of our nation's young were ready to be corrupted at any second, stolen away by that great enemy, books. Comstock, as you can see from his luscious mustache and mutton chops, was a really fun guy. He's been dead for 109 years, and until very recently, his name was promised to be in the trash can of history. But you might have heard it. Has anyone heard his name recently? Yes, so, and you know why, because there are laws named after him that were passed in 1873 that are somehow part of the fight for reproductive justice today. Yeah, they're called zombie laws. They are seemingly unenforceable, probably unconstitutional, but for reasons we don't understand, they just never got off the books. And they banned all kinds of stuff, but one of the things they banned was mailing drugs used for abortion. So earlier this year, in the case about mifepristone, which I'm sure many of you followed, his name was name-checked. He was name-checked for making it illegal to send that through the mail. Mifepristone is one of the drugs used in a medical abortion. Fortunately, that one was struck down 9-0, but I don't think it is the last time that we will hear about Anthony Comstock. The Comstock Act also criminalized obscene, lewd, or lascivious books sent in the mail. And for Comstock, who was an evangelical Christian who believed that his vision of morality should sort of shape all law and policy, you could say that obscenity was like kind of important for him. As indicated by this cartoon from his lifetime. Down here in the bottom left, he's chasing the one dog that dares not to wear clothes. Top right, he's taking a bath, fully dressed. He's cowering before lingerie. It's just a horrible world he lived in. In real life, there was a bronze statue placed on top of the old Madison Square Garden, and it had no clothes on, and he was so upset that he made the owners of MSG put clothes on it. That is true. And Comstock, again, like Moms for Liberty, knew that nobody was more susceptible to obscenity than children. Just one sensual picture, one cheap crime novel, and they might instantly turn into a thief or a killer. And in order to slow the pace of future criminal generations, in 1883, he wrote a book that cataloged the panoply of threats against children. And the result was tonight's first reading. It was called Traps for the Young. And this is literally the opening spread of the book. Kids read a newspaper, and the next thing you know, they're shooting each other, they're aiming knives at each other's hearts, committing arson. And here to help us learn about perhaps the scariest traps of all, death traps by mail, is actor Ajay Naidu. Let's give it up.
Good reading refines, elevates, ennobles, and stimulates the ambition to its lofty purposes. It points upward. Evil reading debases, degrades, perverts, and turns away from lofty aims to follow examples of corruption and criminality. There is a shameful recklessness in many homes as to what the children read. The community is cursed by pernicious literature. Ignorance as to its debasing character in numerous instances, and an indifference that is disgraceful in others tolerate and sanction this evil. Satan is permitted to place his traps where they will do him most good and the children most harm. There is a class that is thrust upon the youth in secret. The favorite method is under the sanctity of the seal in the United States mail. By means of it, the most infamous scoundrel may send the vilest matter to the purest boy or girl. And this is being done systematically. If the facts of the business of obscene publications and indecent articles could be published here, a shock would be given to the sensitive and decent in the community that would make their blood run cold, while a wave of indignation would roll over the country that would sweep away any person found engaging in the business. Secrecy marks these operations. In the darkness of attic room, of basement, or cellar is the favorite sales room. The message of these evil things is death. Socially, morally, physically, spiritually. The moral culture steals upon our youth in the home, school, and cottage, silently striking its terrible talons into their vitals and forcibly bearing them away on hideous wings to shame and death. Like a cancer, it fastens itself upon the imagination and sends down into the future life thousands of roots, poisoning the nature, enervating the system, corrupting the thoughts, leading to secret practices of most foul and revolting character, until the victim tires of life and existence is scarcely endurable. It leads to lust, and lust breeds unhallowed living, and sinks man, made in the image of God, below the level of the beasts. There is no force at work in the community more insidious, more constant in its demands, or more powerful and far-reaching than lust. It is the constant companion of all other crimes. Like a frightful monster, it stands peering over the sleeping child to catch its first thoughts on awakening. This is especially true where the eye of youth has been defiled with the scenes of lasciviousness in the weekly criminal papers or by their offspring's obscene books and pictures. From the first impure thought till the close of the loathsome life of the victim of lust, there is a succession of sickening, offensive, and disgusting scenes before the mind, until life, to such a one, must be made up of disease, wounds, and putrefying sores. Suicide dances before his vision in these moments of despondency as the only means by which to hide his shame and the sole cure for his wretched condition. The brightest sun over his head seems scarcely able to penetrate the gloom of despair that youthful indiscretions have often woven into his life. His one cry is, "Who shall deliver me from the body of this death?" As the jackal follows in the wake of its equally ferocious yet stronger foe, so murder haunts the pathway of lust. Lust has but to whistle, and red-handed murder quickly responds, obedient to its master. I repeat, lust is the boon companion of all other crimes. There is no evil so extensive, none doing more to destroy the institutions of free America. It sets aside the laws of God and morality, marriage bonds are broken, most sacred ties severed, state laws ignored, and dens of infamy plant themselves in almost every community, and then reaching out like immense cuttlefish, draw in from all sides our youth to destruction. Obscene literature may be said to be the favorite agency of the evil one to recruit these dens. Often children are scarcely able to walk before a curse and blight has been attempted by some foul-minded nurse upon these buds of humanity. Scarcely have they become able to observe what is passing about them before the seeds of impurity meet their eyes on the licentious papers that line their pathway. Then, when the critical period approaches, when they emerge from youth to manhood or womanhood, when those mysterious changes in nature take place, and they become aware of new emotions within, then the wily one stands ready to capture and pervert them to his own hellish purposes. Consider some of his devices in this respect. Many a parent, before sending the child away from home to school, canvasses the country over for a proper and desirable institution where the child shall have all the comforts and advantages of home and culture. At last, the child reaches the school, and his or her name appears upon the roll and is printed in a catalog. These catalogs are sought for by those who send circulars through the mail advertising obscene and unlawful wares. In one instance, a professor of a female seminary of great prominence informed me that some party had obtained surreptitiously from one of his assistants some 15 or more catalogs of other female seminaries and colleges. I wrote immediately to each heads of these institutions, and before the close of the year, I received complaints from more than one half of the number written to who had detected noxious matter sent to the students. From 2 of these came almost direct replies containing circulars of death-dealing articles of a most infamous character sent to young ladies. These are unfit for description. These catalogs, then, are directories for the vendors of obscene matter, which furnish them the names of our boys and girls. Children have thrust upon them unsolicited these death traps. Their curiosity is piqued, and unconscious of danger, they often send for the matter advertised simply to gratify inquisitiveness. Let us suppose that a boy who has been brought up in a Christian home is thus placed at a school and has one of these vile circulars sent him by mail. He has never heard of this matter before. His curiosity is just to see what it is the first allurement of the devil. This is made to seem laudable to the child's simple mind. He promises himself that he will not show it to anyone. He'll just see what it is and then destroy it. He thus silences conscience. He sends the money as requested or directed on the circular. In a few days, the cursed thing comes by mail. The recipient hides away to his room in secret to open it to see what it is. Conscience tells him he is doing wrong. A sense of guilt and shame, a feeling that he is doing a mean thing comes over him before the seal is broken. He knows his teacher would disapprove, and that it would break his mother's heart if she knew of it. As he thinks of her, his first impulse is to throw the package unopened in the fire. Blessed is the boy who acts thus wisely, for he shall escape a lasting curse. But the tempter is watching silently. This momentary delay worries him. It will not do to lose his victim when thus almost in his trap, and all that is necessary is just a nibble at the bait for a sure capture. He whispers, "Just look at it a moment so as not to see what it is, and then you can destroy it." So urged, the boy breaks the seal and lets the monster loose. The hideous appearance at first shocks the pure mind, and the poor victim would fain put it out of existence. But the tempter says, "It can't hurt you. You're strong. Look it over and see what it is. Don't be afraid." Thus beguiled, a second look, and then a mighty force from within is let loose. Passions that had slumbered or lain dormant are awakened, and the boy is forced over a precipice, and death and destruction are sure except the grace of God saves him. An indelible stain has been placed upon the boy's imagination, and his vision shall be kept like a panorama, moving to and fro before his mind until its blotted out moral purity and the lamentable condition before described is experienced. Many parent sends their child, pure, fresh, away and vigorous. He comes back after a few years' absence with pale cheeks, lusterless, sunken eyes, enervated body, moody, nervous, irritable, a moral wreck. And the parents mourn that the child is studied too hard. If they could get at the real trouble, it would be found that the child had fallen into one of these lust traps or death traps by mail. Habits thus formed, many a youth promises himself he will check at a certain date when he is a man of 21 years of age. He'll stop this vicious practice. Ah, silly boy. The shackles of habit you will never be able to throw off by your own unaided strength. The longer indulgence continues, the weaker you become to will and do against the force within. The standard of self-respect is being constantly lowered and the will weakened. The time to stop is before you begin. I was hoping for boos and hisses. No one booed or hissed.
Ajay Naidu, everyone. One more round of applause. And of course, for history's greatest prude. If you'd like to read more traps for the young or other Comstock sizzlers like Morals versus Art, you can find his books here, both in print and through our digital databases. Comstock was not the only citizen who took it upon himself to police public morality. In fact, he actually started a whole society for it, the super fun-sounding Society for the Suppression of Vice. They did not do a good job. The society was such a hit that other New Yorkers decided they wanted in on this kind of action. And you'll be surprised to learn that most of those New Yorkers were older white men. In 1905, one group of these better angels got together and started the suspiciously bland-sounding Committee of 14. In our manuscripts and archives division here, we have 103 boxes of this committee's records, which lasted from 1905 to 1932. They started basically as an anti-prostitution group. They were focused on shutting down what were known as Raines Law hotels, which is a complicated thing to explain, but basically they were hotels where people believed that it was easier to engage in prostitution. And the committee was actually pretty successful. Within their first 6 years, they had shut down or helped shut down most of the Raines Law hotels, but they built this infrastructure. They had a team and nice board meetings or something, so they had to keep going. And they had a small team of private investigators who they sent out to look elsewhere for all kinds of ill dealings and vice, mostly bars, because, what good happens in a bar, I guess. And anything these investigators found, they would report to the police. Everywhere they went, they filed reports that looked like this. Very official looking, white form, pre-printed categories, questions, answers typed up nice and neat. Pretty official. Name, address, time, sure, totally normal. Unescorted women, broken out into race, less normal. Is there changing tables of persons of the opposite sex? Is a printed question on the form, which they report on constantly. But the really juicy parts of these reports are in the notes. It's really where you get to know the investigators, who all turn out to be total scumbags. And I can say that because I have literally read hundreds of these things. And comments like you might be able to see here, like this place patronized by unescorted women of questionable character, or there were a few professional-looking prostitutes, whatever that is supposed to mean, are the nice, friendly comments. We're not going to give you a taste of the full depredation of what you can find in these things because it is sometimes quite disgusting. But we did want to give you a taste of what these reports were like and how invasive and frankly creepy that they were. Again, these are private investigators, not hired by law enforcement, just harassing private citizens. So we're going to follow around one investigator right around this neighborhood, actually, over one night and morning on December 6th and 7th, 1918. He goes by the initials HK, and here to share some of his exploits is actor Noah Galvin. Let's give it up for Noah.
Hi there, everybody. Down with prostitutes. December 6th, 1918. 1936 Broadway, southeast corner, 65th Street. Niemeyer's Cafe, saloon, no dance hall. About 25 men I find in bar room, all behaved. 2 unescorted women and 5 couples I find in rear room. One of the unescorted women came in while I was in the premises and sat down opposite my table. In order to get acquainted with her, I called over the waiter, known as William, and asked him to introduce her to me. William said that he knows that girl, but will not take any chances and put men to a women's table, because there was trouble on account of this once before, and the proprietor got a warning. I assured him that I am all right, and in order to convince him, I asked him to call over the bartender, Walter Burstoff, whom I had met last time I was here. I told Walter the story, and without hesitating, he told William that I am okay. I must wait till about after 8 because every evening she meets men in here with whom she made previous arrangements to go out. In case none of them show up, I'll be introduced to her. About 8:30 p.m., one young man came in, went right over to her table, both had a few drinks, and then walked out. I told Walter that I was unsuccessful at picking up that girl in the rear room and would like to go out tonight for a good time. Walter asked me to wait, promising to give an address of a disorderly house. About 10 minutes later, he came back and gave me the address, 123 West 41st Street near 6th Avenue. Before you go up, call up Bryant 1443 and say you want to speak to Mrs. Sage. Soon as you have her on the wire, tell her that you was recommended by Fur Coat Man. Then she'll know that you are okay. I'm sure that you'll have a good time and it wouldn't cost you much. Don't give her more than $3. That is her price. Walter advised me to call her up before noon. 10 or 11 a.m. is the best time. A young man appeared at the bar and started a conversation with Walter. He is known in here as Pete Ryan. Always hangs out in back room or at the bar. I've seen him in here once before sitting with girls and showing them pornographic cards. Walter introduced me to Pete and said that he should go out with me and put me next to a girl, if possible. Pete is supposed to be well known on Broadway. About 10:15 p.m., Pete and I left Niemeyer's, and he took me back to Hotel Wallach. Hotel Wallach, 1492 Broadway. About 10:45 p.m., Pete, Ryan, and I arrived. Pete pointed to a table where 2 women and 1 man were sitting. Pete said that he knew all of them and suggested that we should change our seats to their table. I advised him to go over first and ask whether they want us to join their company, but he said that isn't necessary and took me right over. I was introduced to them as Mr. Harry's. The man was introduced to me as Jack, one of the girls as Mrs. Cunningham, and the other woman as Miss Roberts. Both women appeared as probable prostitutes, and Jack as their paid escort or pimp. Next to me was sitting Miss Cunningham, and I started a conversation with her. She told me that she is only a few weeks in New York. Her home is in New London, and she arrived here purposely to pose for a certain moving pictures concern. Pete was talking to Jack and Miss Roberts. Their conversation consisted of bookmaking. After they got through the talking, Pete called me over to the gents' toilet and told me that I could go out with Miss Cunningham, assuring me that she is a good girl. When we came back to their table, Jack suggested that we leave Wallach's and go somewhere else. From here, we all went to Bartholdi Inn, located at 175 West 45th Street. See report on Bartholdi Inn attached to this report. Both women had satchels checked at the Wallach's Hotel. Miss Cunningham asked me to carry her satchel, and Jack had to carry Miss Roberts' satchel. The satchel appeared to be empty and is used purposely as a cover while getting into a hotel with a man. On the way, Miss Cunningham went into a drugstore and obtained a box of talcum powder. Report on Bartholdi Inn from the Secretary of the Committee of 14 to a Chief Inspector at the NYPD. My dear Inspector, on a recent evening, a committee investigator, in company with a man by the name of Pete Ryan, was introduced by Pete to 2 women going under the names of Miss Cunningham and Miss Roberts. At the Bartholdi Inn, the party had several rounds of drinks. Miss Cunningham then inquired of the committee's investigator, "What do you intend to do? Do you want to go upstairs? There's no use wasting time. It is getting late," she said. "I will charge you $10 for a short while, and if you give me $20, I will stay with you a few hours." The investigator agreeing, she called to George, an employee of the inn who rents rooms and operates the telephone. "I'm going up to Jack's room," pointing at the same time to the investigator. This gave the opportunity to slip out, trusting that this information will be of service in securing evidence against Bartholdi's. Later that night, Wolpin's Restaurant, 1570 Broadway. About 2 a.m., Pete took me over to Wolpin's Restaurant, where I find the place jammed. Among the women, I recognize prostitutes whom I've seen before hustling nearby. Some of them were escorted by Army or Navy officers or civilians. Others were unescorted and solicited men in the premises. One of them I recognized as the girl that sells cigars and cigarettes at the Scandia on Broadway and 47th Street. I told Pete that I'm going home. We both left. He jumped on a car, and I sneaked back into Wolpin's and sat down at a table that was cared for by one of the waiters whom I knew, named Mayers. I told him that I was at the Hippodrome, then took a long walk along Broadway trying to pick up a chicken, but unfortunately, I couldn't get any. I asked him if there's any chance to pick up one of the girls who come in here, and he said that every woman that hangs out in here is a prostitute. He could put me next to anyone, because he knew them well, but advised me not to start with them because they are looking for suckers and are gold diggers. They could get your shirt off once you get acquainted with them. As a friend, I advise you to keep away from them, otherwise you'll be in rags. I'm talking from experience. I admit that every man needs a woman once in a while, and I myself am using women too, but never had anything to do with them in here. Take my advice and wait till next Monday. That's my day off. You can meet me at the waiters' headquarters, located at 12 St. Mark's Place, and we'll go out together. I said that I'll come over to see him if my time will allow. Before I left, Mayers came over to me and again said, if you insist to pick up one in here tonight, I wouldn't stop you. You could select anyone you like better, and I'll point them out to you. They're all alike, and no one more than common prostitutes. Take care of your money when you go out with them, because they are liable to swipe it on you before the night's over. And don't blame me for it in case it will happen. I didn't pick any women up in here, and I left the premises about 3 a.m., promising Mayers to come over and see him again. December 7th, 1918. On my way to 42nd Street, I observed one escorted prostitute soliciting uniformed men. I followed her and seen how she stopped in front of a limousine. Inside were 3 Army officers. She smiled to them, and one of them opened the door and invited her inside. First she refused, then she accepted and got into the car. The only conversation I overheard was when one officer said, "Get 2 more girls," and she answered, "I'll try, let us drive over." One of the officers ordered the chauffeur to start. Before they drove away, the chauffeur jumped off from his seat and came right over to me with the following question. "What the hell are you standing here? Why don't you move?" I said that I'm waiting for a car and will remain here as long as I please. He took his gloves off, getting ready to fight, but one of the officers seen him and called him over. The chauffeur went back to his seat and drove away with his passengers. This occurred in front of the Palace Theater near 47th Street. On the southeast corner, 43rd Street and Broadway, I picked up a prostitute. She asked me if I'll give her $10. After I agreed, I asked her where she'll take me, and she said to her apartment. She insisted that I shall take her home in a taxi, but I refused. Then we parted. On 30th Street near Broadway, I was solicited by a prostitute. After I agreed to pay her $5, she took me over to the Garden Hotel, located on the northeast corner of 27th Street and Madison Avenue. Before we entered, I told her that I haven't any cigarettes, and I'm going over to the United Cigar Store at the opposite corner. I asked her to wait, promising to be right back, but I went in a different direction and disappeared from her. About 3:30 p.m., I called up Bryant 1443 and spoke to Mrs. Sage. I told her that I was recommended by Fur Coat Man, and after she said, "All right." I asked her what time will be most convenient for her to come up. She said that she is busy today and asked me to come over tomorrow afternoon.
Noah Galvin, everyone, bravely inhabiting the dark world of HK. If you have the stomach to read more of these reports, you can dig through the entire archive upstairs in our manuscripts and archives division. I did actually find a key to a hotel room in there. It's like one of those old, like thick, kind of well-decorated keys. The committee dissolved in 1932, and that same year, New York's mayor was about to resign over a bribery scandal. And it was in large part thanks to a New York jurist and politician named Samuel Seabury. Seabury was a former city judge. At the time of his election in 1901, he was actually the youngest judge ever elected in New York history. After that, he also ran for a number of offices and mostly lost thanks to Tammany Hall, who was not a fan of him. And by 1930, he was a lawyer in private practice, though he apparently insisted that everybody call him judge. That year, a scandal broke out that engulfed the NYPD and the courts and eventually led to the resignation of Mayor Jimmy Walker. To give you a sense of who Jimmy Walker was, 2 of his nicknames were Bo James and the Night Mayor. And Jimmy had some very fancy friends in curious corners who liked to do things like open bank accounts in his name and then put money in them. And also give him cash for unnecessary foreign travel, if that sounds at all familiar. And if a city project or two, went in a certain direction, who's to say why, right? But when evidence of the bribery and suspicious travel became too overwhelming, Walker obviously resigned. Wouldn't anybody? Then he fled the country with his mistress, and like any good disgraced politician, became a media commentator with his own radio show that was called Jimmy Walker's Opportunity Hour. That is also true. What helped lead to his downfall was the discovery of another vast network of bribery and extortion encompassing judges in the magistrates' courts and also the NYPD. And before he investigated Walker, Seabury was also the lead investigator on this case. And judging by the look on his face in this picture, it must have made him very tired. It was huge news in the city for a couple of years, and after 2 years, in 1932, Seabury released his final report, which was like 250 some odd pages, calling out corrupt judges, lawyers, and police officers by name, recommending who should be fired, and overall documenting a system in which members of the NYPD entrapped women and people of color, falsely arrested them, and then used lawyers and bail bondsmen to extort them for cash to cover the costs of being found not guilty for the crimes they did not commit. The whole thing is frankly both completely horrifying and also a little cartoonish at the same time. So you're going to hear a little bit of this final report tonight, and we are very lucky to have two fantastic actors to report some of Seabury's findings from 1932. So please join me in welcoming Omar Maskati and Roxy Sternberg.
The investigation of the magistrates' courts in the First Judicial Department and the magistrates thereof, and of attorneys at law practicing in said courts. Final report of Samuel Seabury, referee. Nearly all the cases which come into the magistrates' courts emanate from arrests by members of the police department. The outcome of these proceedings is largely in the control of the arresting officers, upon whose testimony the case must stand or fall. Experience shows that many police officers have not been blind to the opportunities for extortion which this power puts into their hands. In some cases, they would make arrests and immediately offer to sell immunity without even taking the prisoner to the police station. If the money was not paid, the person arrested was arraigned in the police station. Here, a bondsman, whose virtue is extolled by the policeman, is quickly provided. The prisoner is taken by the bondsman as his pawn to the bondsman's office, usually nearby, where further inquiry as to the prisoner's financial status is made. The next morning, the bondsman takes the prisoner to the bank, where sufficient money is drawn out to pay what is supposed to pave the way to freedom. This amount includes an exorbitant charge for the bail bond, rarely less than twice the legal fee, and an additional sum, which the bondsman advises is used to be paying for a lawyer, whom he will provide to represent the prisoner and to fix the case by bribing the officers to testify so as to make the proof insufficient to hold the defendant, and the representative of the district attorney to go easy. Where the bondsman has discovered that the person arrested has additional funds, the victim is held up for additional amounts on the ground that alleged complications have intervened. When the defendant has been extracted of all possible money, the play proceeds. The case comes to trial. The officers testify to a state of facts insufficient to make out a case. The representative of the district attorney stands mute, and the defendant is discharged. If the money demanded by the bondsman is not paid, the officers testify to a complete case. Being officers of the law, as one magistrate put it, their testimony is presumed to be true, and the defendant is convicted no matter what the defendant may say. The procedure was the same, whether the person arrested was guilty or whether the arrest was a pure frame-up. It was, therefore, a very necessary and important part of this investigation to discover the parts of the police department most guilty of these abuses. The Vice Squad. The function of the Vice Squad was the suppression of gambling, prostitution, and the liquor and narcotic traffic. The squad featured two types of arrests, the direct and the indirect. In the direct, the officer himself was a party. He approached the victim and arrested her after she had accepted money for prostitution and was prepared to carry out her bargain. In the indirect, a stool pigeon, the infamous unknown man of police blotters, was the customer, and at a given moment, the officers broke in and made the arrest. The method of the indirect arrest developed into a number of ingeniously contrived rackets. In the doctor's racket, the stool pigeon, posing as a patient, entered a doctor's office while the doctor was away and demanded treatment. He placed money in a conspicuous spot and, despite the protests of the nurse, began to undress. At a given moment, the officers entered and placed the nurse under arrest for prostitution. The landlady racket was also popular. The stool pigeon, as a rule, after renting a room in a rooming house and paying for it with marked money, brought his supposed wife to the room. Almost immediately, the police broke in, arrested the girl for offering to commit prostitution, and arrested the landlady for maintaining a house of prostitution. The officers, thus, obtained double graft. The extent of the practice of these rackets is indicated by the profits resulting to the police officers involved. According to analyses of their bank accounts, 5 of them, in a few years, accumulated more than $500,000. The diligence and efficiency of the members of the Vice Squad were judged by the number of arrests they made and the convictions they procured each month. When the end of a month approached and the record of arrests and convictions was low, the officers would arrest women indiscriminately and frame up cases against them until the number so arrested was sufficient to bring the officers' records up to the desired number. Undoubtedly, the framing of women illustrates an inhumanity more exquisite than the use of physical violence. It means a cold-blooded search for victims with money enough to make the sordid business financially profitable to everyone involved. It means, further, a thorough understanding of the potency of fear. The difficulty found in inducing women to tell their stories showed clearly how strong was their fear of publicity. It is impossible to estimate how many women in this city have been gouged under threat of arrest or conviction of a crime of which they were totally innocent. It is apparent that the stool pigeons were indispensable to the Vice Squad. Chile Acuna, the Dove, Pinto, Harry the Greek, Meyer Slutsky, Chico, and Harry Levy were members of the Brotherhood. Stool pigeons were a costly item in the police budget. One lieutenant testified that the average monthly bill submitted by each officer was $35. In the whole city, the taxpayers paid approximately $100,000 per year for the use of these informers. The Vice Squad's stool pigeons were only half of the system. When the squad had tracked down and captured its victims, they were turned over to the lawyers and bondsmen who completed the work of extorting the unfortunate women. We owe the first disclosure of these activities to John C. Weston, who was Deputy Assistant District Attorney in the Women's Court on 10th Street for 7 years. During that time, he testified, he received money from about 21 lawyers. Most of them had offices in the notorious Lawyers' Row opposite the Jefferson Market Courthouse. He testified that it was the usual thing for these lawyers to say to him, "Anytime one of my cases goes out, I will see that you get $25. Sometimes the bribe was larger. In one case, he was given $150.
Good evening, everyone. So the picture is complete. The following case illustrates graphically the fine flowering of the system in action. The Pototsky case. Mrs. Pototsky, for 2 years before her arrest, had been supporting her 2 little girls. From 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., she worked as a charwoman, which is a cleaning lady. When she returned home, she would sleep, only an hour or so before giving her 2 children breakfast and then sending them off to school. Then she went downstairs to work in a restaurant until 3:30 p.m. She had, in addition, been selling liquor to friends to add $5 or $10 to her income. At 5:30 p.m. on September the 23rd, 1930, she was entertaining 2 friends, Marie Barry and Jack Keeve, when she heard a knock at the door. 2 plainclothes men, Lewis and McFarland of the Vice Squad, stood outside. They said they had been sent by a friend to get a drink. When they persuaded her that they were all right, she let them in. Drinks were poured and $15 placed on the table. Mrs. Pototsky's 2 friends left at approximately 7 p.m. She told the officers that they must go. Just as she began to remove the bottles from the table, Lewis struck her first on one side of the jaw and then on the other. She screamed as she fell. Lewis stood over her and demanded $500. Lewis then fell upon her and ripped off her clothing. At that moment, Mrs. Barry, who had returned to get a package which she had left, knocked at the door. McFarland opened the door for her and struck her in the jaw with such terrific force that blood spurted from her mouth. Meanwhile, Lewis was still wrestling on the floor with Mrs. Pototsky. In his effort to overcome her resistance, he hit her several times and beat her severely. McFarland, at the same time, was holding Mrs. Barry by the hair, dashing her against the wall. Finally, Lewis dragged Mrs. Pototsky to the telephone and called for the patrol wagon. At 9 p.m., 2 battered women were taken to the Old Slip station. Mrs. Pototsky, who was corroborated by Mrs. Barry, testified that she had called for a doctor all night, but no one had paid attention to her case. This case was brought to the attention of a lawyer named Colonel George W. Burley. Mrs. Pototsky had already engaged her lawyer, James J. Sullivan. Colonel Burley concluded from the statements made to him that the case needed further investigation, and he made an exhaustive one. He then arranged to participate in the trial. Colonel Burley's preliminary investigation had shown that Mrs. Potosky had told Sullivan on the night of her arrest that she had $1,000 in the bank, and at Sullivan's direction, she had taken it out of the bank and given it to him in cash because he had said he had wished to hold it for her. After Mrs. Potosky was acquitted, Colonel Burley sent for Mr. Sullivan, and after long delay, succeeded in getting Mr. Sullivan to come to his office. Colonel Burley, after some difficulty, got Sullivan to account for the $1,000. Sullivan took $300 for his own services, $110, which he had said he had paid for the bail bonds, and $20 for some additional service. The balance Sullivan sent by telegram postal order, but only after Colonel Burley got after him. Upon the facts shown by this investigation, Lewis and McFarland were indicted and convicted of assault in second degree, and both were sent to Sing Sing. McFarland for 2 to 4 years, and Lewis for 2.5 to 5 years. Following the hearings before me, the Vice Squad was abolished by the police commissioner, and the members thereof sent back to duty as members of the uniformed force. The employment of informants was prohibited, and entrapment forbidden. Directions were given to observe strictly the provisions of the Code of Criminal Procedure, defining the circumstances in which premises might be entered forcibly to make an arrest. Police officers making arrests for prostitution were thenceforth required to sign a typewritten report, and commanding officers were required to investigate the arresting officer if the charge were to be dismissed. Disciplinary action was taken against some of the police officers involved in this investigation. The police department advises that charges have been preferred against 35 members of the police force. 13 men have been dismissed from the force. The charges against 6 others were dismissed. 1 has died. And the police department trials of the 15 others have not yet been concluded. 17 were indicted by the grand jury in New York County. 3 have been tried and acquitted. Indictments against 8 are still pending. 1 has died, and 5 have been convicted. 3 of perjury, 2 of assault in the second degree. That's it.
Roxy Sternberg and Omar Maskati reading. That's right. I meant to mention earlier, most of the images that you see tonight come from our digital collections, which you can also find online, digitalcollections.nypl.org. This is, as you can see, a photo of Sing Sing. It's actually half of a stereoscopic image. I don't know if anyone's familiar with those, but they're the like kind of old 3D images, and we have like thousands and thousands of them. So Samuel Seabury was not the only private citizen shining a light on police corruption around that time. A year before his investigation started, a prominent citizen of Harlem was in the newspapers almost every other week decrying the treatment of black New Yorkers by the New York police. Her professional background was a little different than Seabury's. She had not studied law. She was not a jurist. She was known as Queenie, or the numbers queen of Harlem, and she ran one of the largest policy rackets uptown in the 1920s. Her name was Stephanie St. Clair. This is one of her newspaper articles that you'll learn more about in a second. She was very mysterious. She hailed either from France or a French Caribbean island. No one was sure. She would never tell anyone, and this was one of the many mysteries that surrounded her life. But what is known is that by the mid-1920s, she lived in Harlem, and she was running an incredibly successful policy operation. Policy, for those who don't know, is basically a lottery. At its simplest, people place bets on a daily number, and whoever gets the daily number gets money. It was a major business in northern cities, in black communities in the 1920s and 30s, and it was illegal, but I think the degree of criminality depends on where you stood. Technically illegal, but also cops were apparently playing it all the time. Furthermore, as a scholar who studied gambling in Harlem pointed out, in a world where black people were often denied bank loans and where playing the stock market seemed as risky as real gambling, the line between legal and illegal was arguably quite fuzzy. But criminal or not, St. Clair was a truly remarkable woman. She was an immigrant who climbed to the top of a field historically dominated by men. She stood up to the mob who came to try and get a foothold in Harlem. and didn't run them out on her own, but she was a big force in making sure they didn't get in. And she was also an incredibly vocal advocate for her fellow citizens of Harlem. In fact, all of tonight's readings are her own words published in the New York Amsterdam News, which is one of the country's oldest and most influential black newspapers. Began publishing in 1909. It is still in print today. You can access all of them on our digital collections. And in these, you will hear Stephanie St. Clair speaking up for her community, speaking out against police corruption, even when it comes directly for her. And to bring you Stephanie St. Clair, please join me in welcoming the one and only Adrienne C. Moore.
Hello. August 21st, 1929. Honorable James J. Walker, Mayor of New York City, City Hall, New York City. Dear Sir, I'm writing this letter to let you know about the terrible conditions of my race in Harlem and what they are going through with the city detectives. The colored people are crushed, robbed, and jailed by those detectives. Your doorbell will ring. When you go to the door and ask, who is it? The answer will be the gas man, the electric man, or the insurance man. When you open your door, 4, 5, or 6 detectives will rush in your house, brutally force you to sit down, then take full possession. They search from one end to the other. Sometimes, if the door is not open for them, they will climb up the fire escape and break into a window. Also, they will stop men and women on the street whom they suspect have policy slips. Take them to some nearby hallway and search all through their clothing, inside and out, even taking off their shoes. After a thorough search, if they do not find anything and feel like taking you down, they do it. When they reach the 12th District or the 5th District Magistrates Court with you, you'll be surprised to know that they produce an envelope with a paper with 3 figures called policy slips. The judge will say $1,000 for bail for special sessions, and you have no choice in the matter, no chance to prove that you have been framed by the detectives. Sometimes the detectives find these policy slips in their search, but if you pay them from $500 to $2,000, you are sure to come back home. If you pay them nothing, you are sure to get a sentence of 60 to 90 days in the workhouse. Now, Your Honor, I beg you, with tears in my eyes and a broken heart full of sorrow, to please do something for these conditions which my people are going through in Harlem. If you will investigate, you will find these and many more like cases going on. My people cry, oh, we can do nothing, for there is no law, no mercy, no justice for us. I tell them, yes, there is a law and mercy and justice, and plenty of it in New York City. But you have to look to the right persons for it. September 18th, 1929. To the members of my race, I've been asked by many persons if the mayor and the commissioner of police have replied to my letter to the mayor about police brutality. These men have too much respect for the members of my race not to reply. Both the mayor and the police commissioner have replied, and the matter is being carefully considered. If officers meet you on the street and suspect you of anything, do not let them search you on the street, or do not let them take you to the hallway and be searched. If they meet you on the street and say they suspect you something is going wrong at your house, if you say come and see and they find anything wrong at your house and should arrest you without a search warrant, you have nothing to say because you invited them into your home. In conclusion, I will say I'm going to continue fighting until the members of my race are freed from these mistreatments. October 30th, 1929. It was a big surprise to learn that the colored population of New York City is approximately 400,000, and only 1 out of every 10 are voters. Mayor Walker is working very hard to better the conditions in Harlem. You can now see a big change. In order to continue this good work, Mayor Walker must be reelected next Tuesday. In the same manner that I begged him to help my race, which he is now doing, I now beg you all to vote for Mayor Walker. Regardless of any promises the other candidates may make to you, Mayor Walker has proved to be our friend in every way, and we owe him our full support. November 13th, 1929. I received a letter from Mrs. Davis of 438 West 163rd Street, in which she said she had been beaten up by the police and asked me to call to see her. I went and found her walking lame. Her face was brutally bruised. Her eyes were black and bloody, and her hand was bandaged. In all of my experiences, I have never heard of a more brutal mistreatment of a woman. Mrs. Davis's statement to me is as follows. I had visitors at my apartment on the morning of the raid, and as I went to the door to see one of them out, 5 white men walked in. Without saying a word or showing a badge or any papers of any kind, one of the men began to search through my dresser in my bedroom. Taking up my pocketbook, he opened it and began to search through it. I rushed up to him, snatched the pocketbook out of his hand, and asked him what right he had to come into my house and begin searching my things without showing a badge or a search warrant. My first impression of the men was that they were burglars. Smelling liquor, I said, "You're drunk." One of the men replied, "Yes, crazy drunk." I then insisted that they show me a search warrant and some means of identification. One of the men handed me a piece of paper. As I took it and walked across the room to a better light to read it, the man yelled to the others to not allow me to read it and to take it away from me. 2 of them grabbed me. One of them bent my fingers back until I released the paper, nearly breaking my thumb. After they had taken the paper away from me, one of the men, whom I afterward learned was Officer O'Neill, began to beat me and to call me vile names. He hit me on the head and in the face, choked me and kicked me on the leg, injuring me so badly that I am now under the care of a physician. Dear friends, I do not know how you feel about this case, but for my part, I am not going to let this officer get away with it and mistreat a woman as he has done. If colored people would stick together, these bad mistreatments would never happen, but we are too much against one another. November 20th, 1929. To whom it may concern, I have received letters and telephone messages from men which have annoyed me very much, and I have this occasion to ask them publicly to please not annoy me. I, Madam St. Clair, am not looking for a husband or a sweetheart. If they do not stop annoying me, I shall publish their names and letters in the newspaper. January 1st, 1930. Well, folks, I have been arrested. Yes, arrested and framed by 3 of the bravest and the noblest cowards who wear civilian clothes. Listen, here's the story. On Monday morning, I left my home at 11 o'clock. When I reached 155th Street and Edgecombe Avenue, I met Officer Moore in company with another colored man. I was waiting for the bus. The 2 men took the same bus. When I got off, I felt that there was an enemy following me. The premonition came upon me suddenly, but I turned around to look. There was no one. Then I proceeded to my destination at number 177 West 140th Street. When I got into the hall at number 177, an officer rushed into the hall behind me, together with another officer. One had a bundle of papers in his right hand. Another officer rushed in and said, "We need you." Right at this time, a 3rd policeman also rushed to me. Then 3 of them pushed me out of the hall, put me under arrest, and carried me to the station house on the framed-up charge of violating the penal law 074. They framed me with a bundle of papers purporting to be policy slips. Suppose I was banking. I would never be foolish enough to have on me at any time anything that would incriminate me. Suppose I was banking. What would I be doing on the street with a bundle of slips in my hand or possession? Now, I have just begun to fight the police, and I will never stop. I'm going to dig up everything I know. I'm going to dig up everything and expose them more. January 25th, 1930. Well, Here I am again after my battle in court with the police last Monday. I'm still going strong, ready to fight to the finish. I'm a brave woman, and I shall get the justice that belongs to me and my race, or die. You'd have thought that the whole police department's lives were in jeopardy if you had been in court on Monday, last to see this lieutenant here, the chief deputy there, and the policeman here. The courtroom was full of them. It made me feel good that just a mere little woman, only 31 years old, who weighs 120 pounds, and is 5 feet 5 inches tall, could bring all those police out to spend a whole day of city's time in a courtroom. They tried to do everything and anything they could to me. They told the most unthought of tales in court on Monday, but that is no more than I expected. They said that I said that perhaps now I might stop fighting the police. Would I, a woman who has been fighting the police for the last year, end my fight in such an easy way? No, indeed not. February 17, 1930. Dear reader, please don't give me any more of your sympathy. I don't need it, for instead of it being a help to me, it is becoming a burden. If you use your brain more and your tongue less, you'll find out that you need the sympathy more than I do. When I started exposing the police and their doings, I didn't expect to receive any compliments from them. I knew just what I was doing, and I know what I'm doing now. I shall never stop exposing the police until they stop this terrible mistreatment of the Negro race. I don't understand how these police, who are supposed to be the protection of the people, can make raids for so-called policy slips when these same men are participants of the game themselves. I'm willing to back up this statement by calling the names and badge numbers of the persons in question, and I can also prove it by witness. This is not my first fight for you folks. I began to fight for you all since 1919. Now I've been fighting the mighty police since 1928, and I don't know when it will end. Thank you.
Adrienne C again, reading Stephanie St. Clair. If you're interested to check out these papers, we have a remarkable resource here called LibGuides. It sounds super nerdy, and they are, but they're incredible. They're guides about how to discover things at the library. And there's an incredible one about using the extensive access to historical Black papers from around the country, as well as papers from all across the African diaspora. That's libguides.nypl.org. Side note, Stephanie St. Clair lived at a very famous address in Harlem, 409 Edgecombe Avenue. Other residents there included W.E.B. Du Bois, Thurgood Marshall, Aaron Douglas, Elizabeth Catlett. And I mention that because another cool resource we have are the tenant association records of 409 Edgecombe Avenue up at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. Okay, one more reading tonight, a few more voices of the people. In 1926, another venerable anti-crime society, aptly named the Society for the Prevention of Crime, announced a contest. And here to read this announcement, one of the great voices of the people who represented them in the District Attorney's Office of Law and Order until just last year, Jack McCoy himself, the legendary Sam Waterston.
Hi. Announcement of awards of $3,000 by the Society for the Prevention of Crime. The Society recognizes the present appalling tendencies in law-breaking and in the public attitude toward it. While many remedies from special angles have been publicly suggested, few persons have had opportunity and incentive to fairly study the question in perspective and prepare a plan for permanent improvement. A healthy interest on the part of every citizen in the observance of law and public safety is absolutely essential to a successful democracy. Private opinion en masse becomes public opinion and law. It is because good theories do not always work out in practice that the plan is required to be practicable. The best theories should be judged by the extent to which they can be successfully applied, while the value of a suggested single practical step should be judged by the breadth and probable permanence of the improvement it will produce.
Okay, so $3,000, $2,500 of it went to the best idea from a citizen, which is roughly $45,000 in today's money. $500 went to the best idea from a police officer. It's about $9,000. And the society got a ton of responses, over 1,000. They were all typed up by some poor bastard and placed into this gigantic book. And somehow I have no idea how that book ended up here. It's when you go on the archive finder, it says the Society for the Prevention of Crime Records, and it's literally just this one book, which is like yay tall. And this poor bastard read every single entry in the book. And as you might imagine from a random grab bag of random people who were asked to imagine how to fight crime in New York City, if nothing else, the ideas were novel. And so that they might inspire you for your future fights in the preservation of law and justice, Sam is going to read a few of the best ideas. We've grouped them into a few themes for you. So first up, how to nurture law-abiding children.
Teach children to kill in self-defense. Require schools to give 1 hour a week practice with target figure of a man. Compulsory education of prospective mothers to establish prenatal morality through subconscious mind. Appoint youthful leaders to guide children, calling them knights and dames of the nation. Societies and social agencies have furnished too much professional interference. Give back to the parent and the teacher the right to use their own judgment. Wholesome whipping, when it is needed, is preferable to unwholesome coddling. Stricter measures would bring sob sisters' protest, but there would be fewer Leopolds. Mother's knee and strap oil for these 16-year-old men and women hunting jazz thrills. Child labor should be encouraged, at least in spirit. Establish as part of the curriculum of all public schools, drilling all ages constantly in lessons on the evils of untruthfulness, dishonesty, promiscuous petting parties, the false bravado of drinking or in trying narcotics, and on the advantages of right thinking and right doing, and so create habitual right-mindedness. Have children touch their hats to police as friends.
Okay, but so even if you did apply all of this sage wisdom to children, some of them are bound to slip through the cracks. And when those we've lost start to ponder a life of crime, how do we help turn them off that path?
Form a secret corps of dead-shot marksmen with roving commissions, paid for by banking and business interests and unknown to the police. About 300 such men stationed in strategic business offices with salaries of $3,000 each for 1 year will discourage bandits. Any bandit caught red-handed to get prison term and public lashing. Make it hot for gunmen. Open the saloons, censor the movies, take Bible out of schools, preach patriotism less, treat radicals better, admonitory literature in candy stores. Register all males as in the war draft, require pledge to anti-crime movement and to never have a gun. When registering, all to receive buttons marked anti-crime movement. Make failure to wear the button a crime. Get away from the slums. Prohibit nude figures and marketing of salacious books and plays. Discourage hot, highly spiced food. License chiropractors, prohibit lotteries and solicitation of funds by sisters accompanied by orphans. Urge yearly inspection of teeth. Pay criminals to give information about each other, and by carefully laid propaganda, create mutual suspicion and fear, encourage antagonistic competition between kinds as highwaymen and pickpockets. Appoint every fifth family as monitor over the other four. To report everybody's business. Suspect butlers and maids.
Okay, but you failed the children, your preventative measures have fallen short. There is, of course, always punishment. And sometimes the punishment is delivered in rhymed couplets.
For serious crimes, put in electric chair and give a shock not strong enough to kill him. Then serve time. Exhibit electric chair in public square with use. For bandits and hold-up men, mark them for life by taking a slice off the top of their left ear. In stores, have something arranged to throw tear gas in bandits' face. Employ deterrents which strike at man's ego, castration instead of death penalty, distinguishing mark on face of culprit. Condemn as murderer every assailant, brand him with a P, give him bread and water till he dies. And this is the poem. To prevent crime. If waves of crime we would have cease instead of having it increase, heroic measures must ensue to give to criminals their due. No halfway measures must they be, more than placed under lock and key, and unless laws are changed, it's plain a crimeless age will never again. A dungeon should all crooks await, in which to sit and meditate, with nothing that could them amuse or tend to drive away the blues. No booze had, such as sold today, for which someone outside must pay. No news to read, no papers take, the rotten kind that culprits make, with no physicians when with chills to dole out anti-ague pills, or dentists to give a dental aid when crazed by teeth that are decayed. And as for food, those of the ilk should nothing get but bread and milk. And for punishment we'll add, no shave or haircut should be had. Then what a jury's verdict saith a crook should get e'en put to death, so mote it be, without delay, to penalty be sure to pay. Do tell us, if you can, what worth is such a being on our earth. And should we o'er one's ending sob, who would us kill or would us rob? Then law should be, no pardon can be granted crooks by any man, and should for pardon one apply, it must be unto the Most High. These terms straightway should take effect, so crooks may know what to expect, and know too, without any fake, the medicine they'd have to take. Then o'er crime thoughts might hesitate, when knowing what might be their fate. And the Most High, their crimes to end, our terms would surely recommend.
Sam Waterston, everybody. One more time for Sam, Adrienne Moore, Omar Maskati, Roxy Sternberg, Noah Galvin, and Ajay Naidu. And thank you, everyone, for coming. I realize we didn't put these resources in the program, but if you're interested to learn more, you can email us at publicprograms@nypl.org, and we'll send you any info you want to know. Thanks again. Have a great night.